Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to see you again for a new video. You're in my office now. I've just finished my consultations and today we're going to talk a bit about the benefits. We haven't really discussed the benefits of dry fasting compared to water fasting. We'll talk a little about that and share a couple of updates. Our summer retreat is coming up soon. It's in just over a month. Six weeks from June 27th to July 8th. So we've moved the dates a bit to secure chalet availability. We're on the French-Swiss border, but in Switzerland, in Champéry. Right across from Champéry, you have the Dent du Midi mountain range. It's stunning. We have a chalet right in front of the mountain, so we will be at an altitude of 1,700 meters. So there will be small lakes, and we will have opportunities for walks that will be super interesting, at least around the chalet. And then there is a large terrace, so we can practice yoga, do the usual morning exercises, and there you have it. So I believe there are 2 spots left. Yes, unless there's a mistake, so we'll be a nice group, a great group. So there are people who come for prevention, there are people who come for regeneration every year. That's what I do, 7 days a year, plus the fasting is short. And then there are people who come with medical conditions, so that's a little bit the group we'll have in the summer. And then those who are interested, there you go. And then there is still an open date this year in September in Montenegro, where we are in a different setting. And this year, for the first time, we will resume water activities. People will be able to take seawater baths, which will really help remineralize. I had tried it 1 year, and until now, we have the last cure. We haven't done sea baths, and the water was a bit chilly for some. Coming out of I don't know what, we are a bit fragile, so in terms of immunity we don't dare to go directly into the cold water. We prefer to regain some energy and not expose ourselves to too much stress afterwards. And this year we will be able to, because it will be late September to early October, the water temperature in Montenegro will be 24 to 25, so this will allow for sea bathing, which will be extremely beneficial. To remineralize afterwards, so there you have it. So those are the updates. I will also share another update. I have received, there are people, so this is a little warning, there are people who start on their own at home with things I don't know about, who watch videos of people who have tried 7, 9, 10 days, whatever, who see that and then think, oh well, it's easy, I'll do it at home. And then we have people, a person who ends up in the emergency room. So people call me, explain a bit. When we ask a few questions, we realize that this person was already poorly prepared for the I don't know what. These are things that are poorly prepared. You can see the preparation is botched, is messed up. Then you have things that go wrong, including the I don't know what itself. There are people who will do certain things that are not right, you see, that will jeopardize the benefits of fasting, that will endanger the person. In particular, doing certain types of activities, doing certain types of things. There are always people who amuse themselves by doing silly things, so to speak, in this I don't know what, by doing things. You see, going to do certain therapies, mixing certain things, doing certain activities and all that, it will really counteract the effects of the I don't know what. It will disrupt the work that is being done in depth and all that. If it's poorly managed, it can lead to, well, it's like a dog chasing its tail. Eventually, you end up with the person, you see, exceeding their capacity to adapt. They can no longer cope with toxins. They can no longer handle stress. The immune system, the nervous system, the endocrine system are overwhelmed like never before. And then you end up with accidents that can happen if people prepare poorly, make mistakes during the I don't know what, and especially make errors in the recovery. That was really, so the person really did everything wrong across the board. And then we have people, you see, who find themselves in danger, you know, trying to imitate people they've seen on the internet. So be careful with that. We're all different. Some will be able to do it easily. It's a 9-day fast. And then you also have to see, there are people who claim they do 7, 9, 10 days or even more in videos. And then when you question them a little, you realize that it's not really fasting they're doing. They drink coffee, they do things, we've seen it all. There you go. So be wary of the videos people show you. They might be people who take hot showers, you know, who drink herbal teas or something, and who say, yes, I'm doing dry fasting. Maybe for 2 hours they drink and eat something. You see, there are people who say they do dry fasting but actually don't. So you need to understand that dry fasting is either a strict, complete dry fast where you have no contact with water at all, or a slightly softer dry fast with cold water effusions. But it's only about cold water effusions that you pour over the body, and not hot showers that will allow water to penetrate. So there you have it. Those are the two definitions we have. Either it's a strict dry fast with no contact with water at all, not even brushing or rinsing the mouth. Many people rinse their mouths and claim they are doing a dry fast, but that's not a dry fast. They rinse their mouths every day. That's not a dry fast. From the moment you let anything inside, it's not the same. Then, well, there are cold showers. It's a softer type of fasting where we really allow for circulatory work, for addressing certain types of issues. It's very effective, so you can choose one or the other depending on what you want to do. So be careful. Don't venture into dry fasting alone at home. It's dangerous. Accidents can happen. People can fall into a coma. There was also a case 1 year of a person, well, nothing to do with me, but where I heard of a diabetic person who supposedly did a dry fast and fell into a coma. So that's diabetic ketoacidosis. The person, well, their blood sugar level drops. It creates a blood problem. The person can collapse, so it's an emergency. It is necessary to replenish it. You need to provide glucose, and then the person, there you go, they come out of the coma, there you go. So that's how you take care of someone experiencing a sugar drop. There you go. So nothing dramatic, but it can still lead to fears and anxieties. So don't venture alone at home, and fasting at home is not productive. You are ingrained in your usual structure of food, drink, whatever. And then you have, you don't create a change to be able to move on to a health problem. You need to find yourself in a new orientation. You're a little bit in an unknown system, and you let go, because if you're at home, you have all your habits ingrained, and then it's very complicated to have an effective impact. When you fast at home it's difficult. People who fast at home, I think we are 30% less effective than if we are in a, I would say maybe even more. We have, there you go, I know that at home it can only be done in case of emergency. You have sinusitis, laryngitis, tonsillitis, an infection. There you go, you have no choice. A COVID, no matter what, you have no choice. It's an emergency. You are bitten by a tick. There you go. You must react quickly and save yourself from tick-borne. Encephalitis, for example, there you fast for 3-4 days. You have an infection, it's an emergency, there's something, there you do it at home, there you go. But if you have the time, if you have planned a fast, I advise against doing it at home. It's not as good, you see. And then there's everything else. Doing it in a group is like the best option. There's a whole dynamic. You let go, you let things happen. That's really how you get the best effects, you see. You don't have to worry about resuming eating, what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, which will drain your energy everywhere. You have things to think about, to process mentally. You're no longer letting go. You're in control. So we notice that people who fast at home for a long time, these effects are not extraordinary. Even if you're in nature, it's still not ideal. The best is really either you're in a group, either you fast alone in an outdoor place, a natural setting. Possibly you can be alone with yourself. That's also possible. But for that, you need to be somewhat experienced. And there you go. Some therapists have a great understanding of their bodies, and then they can do it. If you don't have any medical conditions, it's manageable to go for a long dry fast. But in any case, for people who have medical conditions, who don't know themselves too well, I strongly advise against embarking on a long dry fast. There you go. So think about it, be careful, because if you have accidents, you end up in the emergency room. What will people think? There you go. Dry fasting is dangerous, it's crazy, there you go. So it's not good for the method. And that's why we have people coming to the retreats. They go on a retreat, they see how it goes, they understand the process, and then there's a greater trust that develops when you've done a guided cleanse. Afterwards, you can eventually try it at home, well, at home or outside without supervision, freely, outdoors. And there you have it. So, there you go. So today we're going to talk about some benefits. In general, we'll discuss the initial benefits. So the first benefit of dry fasting, we have a few. We'll cover the main ones. We're not going to make a 2-hour video. We could spend 2 hours on the benefits. The first one is detox. So detox, spring, the nice weather is coming. So dry fasting is currently the detoxification method. I've said it several times. It's a reminder, the most effective one you can find. Above all therapies, you can't find anything that detoxifies as much as dry fasting. You experience a release of cellular toxins like no other method. You can use DMSA for heavy metals, but kids, that's it. It's totally dangerous. You can take all the plants, even pine resin, which is a good remedy I use in preparation for dry fasting and also during recovery. It removes what's at the cellular level, it cleanses already, it disinfects, that's it. But dry fasting, if I take pure dry fasting, we are number one ahead of all plants, ahead of clay, ahead of whatever you want. Zeolites, detoxifying plants, the methods of the sauna, the hammam, whatever you want. Everything that exists, there you go. You won't find anything more effective than that. You lose about 1 or 2 kilos of fat, that's my case. For people who are slimmer, there's less weight that comes off, so fewer kilos are lost each day. And so this therapy is really powerful on the organs that will be cleansed, regenerated in a second phase. We see that stem cells come into play in a second phase for complete regeneration, but there's already a bit of regeneration happening with the cleansing. Some small changes occur, and then later you have the stem cells that will regenerate the organs. Well, what needs to be understood is that dry fasting, for example, if you undertake a complete dry fast until the second acidosis crisis, up to about 9 days, is equivalent to roughly 4 weeks of fasting, or even better, because you go through all the phases which you would typically do in a water fast. You have an initial phase that involves some cleansing, and indeed in dry fasting you practically go through all 3 stages. You do the cleansing, you undergo restructuring and regeneration, and reset the entire body in a single treatment. Afterwards, it is explained that the first treatment people generally undertake is more aimed at detoxification and cleansing. Thus, we notice this in chronic degenerative diseases. Unfortunately, a single treatment will not be enough to solve all the problems. It will proceed in order of priority. Work on a problem that will be addressed. Thus, dry fasting will already deeply cleanse the toxins that will be released into the blood, and then the lymphatic system will come into play. Afterwards, the organs will be cleansed, then the entire cell will be purified. It's what we call a major spring cleaning. And then dry fasting will work deeply on the waste. The toxins will be cleared, and we will also be relieved at the brain level. You have ketone bodies that will come into play. After 24 hours of dry fasting, ketone bodies enter significantly. So 3 to 5 times more ketone bodies than dry fasting, than water fasting, for example. So more ketone bodies mean more. We'll see the neurotrophic factor, what is called BDNF, a brain regenerating factor. And then surprisingly, it is rather discouraged in water fasting. They list it among the contraindications. The Russians have included it somewhat in certain contraindications, and then experience shows us there have been 2 cases involving epilepsy, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's, and indeed the results are positive, meaning that BDNF will still have a reparative effect on brain tissues. It will be able to work again on people with memory problems. This neurotrophic factor will rebuild neurons, so it's quite interesting. I had doubts at first about involving people with these conditions, but experience has shown us that dry fasting is still very positive for these neurodegenerative factors. So there's no harm in giving it a try. Especially for someone with early stage Alzheimer's, for example, dry fasting would be really recommended, because you really have a massive increase in ketone bodies that will call upon BDNF, and BDNF will restructure, it will regenerate the brain, thus rejuvenating your neurons. It's quite simple. So general detox effect. There are also a lot of heavy metals that people have. They are on the rise. So all of that you will detoxify. So you urinate every day. You produce waste in large quantities. So I'm not going to go into details. Even more detox, but I'm just talking about the general effects, the benefits of dry fasting. The second effect is anti-inflammatory. We currently have the most anti-inflammatory therapy available. You can take all the plants in EPS, gemotherapy, aromatherapy, you can do all that, but you won't have an effect that is as synergistic, comprehensive, and effective as dry fasting on any inflammation. You should know that the water you drink during fasting, for those who do water fasting, will maintain inflammation, so you cannot have a spectacular result on inflammation or an accident. For example, if a person had a car accident where you have severe inflammation of an organ or a specific area, or you have dental surgery, if you want to reduce swelling and inflammation, dry fasting is number 1. So as a preventive measure before surgeries, I recommend people practice dry fasting. It is quite effective. So the anti-inflammatory effect has been demonstrated by studies on the markers we have. We have markers. We have the ultrasensitive CRP, we have the classic CRP, so all of this is validated. In the United States, I was able to gather information on this, a decrease in the classic CRP, a decrease in the ultrasensitive CRP. These are inflammatory markers. We also have TNF-alpha, which is responsible for fever, inflammation, and cell death in cancers and Alzheimer's. We have psoriasis and all inflammatory diseases where this TNF-alpha rises. Dry fasting really reduces this TNF-alpha. We also have the IL-B factor, which is a mediator of inflammation, particularly cardiac inflammation. And then you also have ILL, another inflammatory molecule that worsens, causing autoimmune diseases, and is also generated during infection. So all of this, ILL and ILLL, are markers that are significantly reduced with dry fasting, and this is validated. And then there's TNF-alpha. We have 4 inflammatory factors, so don't hesitate. In case of inflammation, dry fasting is really effective. For athletes who suffer from chronic inflammation and acidosis, dry fasting is highly recommended. You can regenerate tissues as seen in cases of osteoarthritis and also in osteoporosis. Very effective for people suffering from osteoporosis. You regenerate bone, you regenerate tissues, you regenerate cartilage. Then, as I always say, one treatment is not necessarily enough. There are people who come for treatment thinking that one treatment will solve all their problems. I always say the first one, you see it as a detox treatment, a cleansing. And then afterwards, how did it work? You can reapply the compress. If you have a specific condition, you should count on at least 9 to 10 months and then 2 or even 3 staggered treatments. And then afterwards, it's maintenance every year or even twice a year. It's a minimum of 7 days of dry fasting if you want to do a good job of cleansing and restructuring. There you have it. Anti-inflammatory effect is number 2. And then at number 3, you have, as we've briefly discussed, this brain-derived neurotrophic factor, so with the ketone bodies. But you also have growth hormones that come into play. Thus, the growth hormone is also beneficial in rejuvenation, in tillage. So, at number 3, we have complete cerebral regeneration, which will trigger this BDNF. So, we are working on neuroplasticity, cerebral neurogenesis. Therefore, it's quite interesting for having cognition, quick thinking, and clear ideas. Dry fasting is really recommended. There you go. When you undergo long dry fasts, indeed, after 10 days of dry fasting, you won't talk much. I can assure you that you are in quite an interesting internal state. You can be told the worst news. You are so immersed in the well-being from these ketone bodies working from within. It's almost like doping, truly, for those who have never experienced it. Well, you really need to you need to get past 7 days to be able to feel it. You truly have ketone bodies in abundance being secreted. Then you really have a completely euphoric effect. But I would say it's a morphine-like effect, if you will. When I was young, I had a road accident and received a morphine injection. It reminds me a little of that. There are similarities in any case. Here we go. So, effect number 3, cholesterol. We see it a lot now. So, doctors are focused on this so-called good and bad cholesterol. Well, it's a bit silly because it's not really, it doesn't really reflect the latest research by Professor Lorga. He clearly shows us that taking statins is not the solution, that it's actually rather aggravating. It will worsen the body on several levels. And then oxidized LDL cholesterol is the one we mainly look for in a blood test. And classic LDL just means you're eating a bit fatty. But in no way does it reflect cardiovascular problems. So there are people in the Caucasus who live with extremely high cholesterol levels, but they have antioxidant protection. There is no problem. Cholesterol is not a danger. On the contrary, if you don't have enough, you may really encounter problems that can appear at the hormonal level. For a man, for example, there is no more testosterone being produced. Hormonal problems can arise if you don't have enough. So it's better to have a little more than not enough. There you go. So dry fasting, nevertheless, will still lower it a little bit. If you have a little too much triglycerides, it will bring you back a bit to the norm. It will bring balance to all of this. And it will especially increase HDL, the so-called good cholesterol. There you go. So that has also been validated. Well, my pine resin also works very well for people with cholesterol. It has been validated on people who have taken resin for 2 to 3 months. It's much better to take pine resin, which has a chemical statin that is really anything but good. There you go. So pine resin, I could almost say I could be ultra rich, because currently the best-selling remedy in the world is statins. It's billions and billions and billions. So here you have a natural product that not only does you good, provides you with minerals, alkalizes you, and is, I would say, far more effective, validated. So I have feedback, so I know exactly what this product does. Even after a month of using pine resin, you see a reduction in LDL, so that's validated. Then there's a reduction in blood sugar levels. So that's always interesting. There you go. So here we'll look at a marker called glycated hemoglobin. Insulin therapy, you see, is not necessarily a reflection of 3, 4, 5 months of mistakes. On the other hand, the biological analysis of glycated hemoglobin truly gives us a reflection really over 3 months. So we see that the person consumes too much sugar, too much glucose in general. There are different types of sugar that exist, and then we have this blood sugar level that rises, and then we create glycated hemoglobin, which is an aggravating factor that can cause significant neurological disorders if not monitored, as well as diabetes and other issues like that. So it's really an interesting factor to monitor. So even short dry fasts, a long dry fast once a year will really ensure that you don't become diabetic, that you don't experience aggravations. There you go, of the neurological type, etc. There you go. There you go. So the other benefits include dry fasting. We work on the recovery processes of the immune system's resistance. It's important to know that the immune system is mainly represented by the Peyer's patches in the intestine. You have 80% of immunity there. 80% is in the intestine. So if you work on renovation, I remind you that dry fasting for 7 days, 7 to 9 days, you have almost completed the 3 stages. You have detoxification and a certain renovation that occurs with the strains that come into play, which means you shorten the time by 3, achieving a quite impressive time gain compared to a water fast that would take 4 weeks. And then afterwards, with the recovery being very long, it takes you almost 6 to 8 weeks if you really want to have a rejuvenating effect with water fasting. Whereas with dry fasting, in 7 days, you have almost 7 to 9 days, you truly have a rejuvenating effect on the immune system, on any autoimmune pathology you have. You really have a powerful effect on immunity. So the markers of immunity, we know this, so all types of lymphocytes, you do a lymphocyte typing, so it's a biological analysis. And then you do a dry fast for 7 days, you get your results. 6 weeks to 2 months later, you see a complete improvement in all your blood biology. So we also have interferon, which is improved, the NK natural killer, all of that has improved, has increased, more red blood cells, more white blood cells. But the tests, you need to do them about 6 weeks to 2 months later, otherwise they will be slightly skewed. Currently, dry fasting, therapeutic, well conducted, well prepared, with good preparation in advance. For autoimmune diseases or even early stage cancers, you have a therapy that is quite formidable. I would say the best therapies you can find currently. You can't find better because even plants, even certain types of dietary supplements can help. There are people who offer certain types of supplements, plants, it's good, it's interesting, but you won't go as fast as with dry fasting itself. Protection against various psycho-emotional influencing factors, we've talked about that a little. So we really have this calming effect. We have people who came with antidepressants, except for Prozac, Ritalin, all that. It's really a nasty thing. I'm not afraid to say it. We have very significant addictive effects, and for people who have been doing this for a long time, it's very complicated. On the other hand, with all other psychotropics, people who have antidepressants, we can really manage to get rid of them with a treatment. We've had cases, so it's quite interesting before starting a medication process to look into dry fasting and embark on a treatment to see how we feel afterwards. Generally, people no longer need it. We also have results in things related to addiction, whether it's cigarettes, alcohol, sugars, etc. For people with this type of addiction, undergoing treatment will calm things down and allow for a fresh start. There you go. Another main benefit of dry fasting is its anti-infective effect. As you well know, every bacterium, every virus, every parasite feeds on water. Once you cut all that off, you have a spectacular effect on all types of infections, various ear infections. But this would be for long dry fasts or for conditions like sore throats, sinusitis, short-term infections. It would be 3 days, 4 days. We already see an interesting effect. And otherwise it would be for people with more significant infections. You would need to go through 7 days to achieve an anti-infective effect. It should be noted that nowadays there are many problems with antibiotics that disrupt the immune system and affect the liver. And then there are resistances. These antibiotics are problematic. They are toxic to our systems. And then they strip away all the good bacterial flora you have. Moreover, they are not guaranteed to completely and thoroughly resolve an infection. So indeed, dry fasting can truly be an alternative if you have the knowledge and confidence to know what you're doing and can isolate yourself in a corner and do it with full awareness. It's something quite interesting. If you have something resistant and you can't get rid of it, always consider this possibility. Then organ repair, rejuvenation, and anti-aging. We made a video about it. So currently you have dry fasting, which is the #1 anti-aging therapy. You have stem cells, growth hormones, and ketone bodies. You regenerate, you rebuild tissues, you have a formidable system to completely reset your body. To renew your organs, which is truly quite interesting. Currently in anti-aging therapies, you can take all sorts of dietary supplements, get hormone injections, whatever you want. You won't find anything as fast and as effective in anti-aging efficiency. You can watch a video by Loic on my channel. He did 4 10-day dry fasts over 12 months. You see the first video he made, you see the gray hair, you see the face of a man who is of a certain age, and then you see the video made a year later. It's not the same person at all. His hair has darkened, his face looks younger, you see 10 to 15 years less. The Russians have people who fast regularly every year. There is an evaluation that has been made of an increase in life expectancy of 15 to 25 years for people who adopt this system that I have been practicing for several years. This involves a minimum of 7 days of dry fasting and a dry fast of 24 to 36 hours per week. So that's the bare minimum. When you have pathologies, no matter which ones, count on 3 dry fasts over a year. That's roughly what needs to be done. Each case is individualized. You can't just say this is for you, that's for you. Each case is personal and must be evaluated during a consultation. That's something not to forget. That's why we have consultations. People who come for a treatment have an appointment with me. We take the time, we look, we can roughly determine how many treatments will be needed. We can get a sense of the person, and I think it's the only fasting center where a complete evaluation is done, at least at the start. In most fasting centers you go to, they don't know where you stand. So here we do an analysis with the Metatron, a Russian biological analysis system where you have a comprehensive analysis of all organs, all systems. We know exactly where you stand, and then we can monitor people afterwards to find out the results obtained. We can see if there is an infection. We can see all sorts of things quite precisely. So that's at least what we do. So prevention, so anti-aging effect. Personally, I like to combine, of course, dry fasting with dietary supplements, with plants, depending on the health assessment we have. You can find there are lifestyle techniques, there are different things. We talk about it during the treatments. It's something that also needs to be put together. It's like a soccer team. We are a team. We need to work in synergy. So for example, with a plant, we provide synergies, we can offer dietary supplements that are suitable for the person. But it's not just random stuff you see on the internet. You need to try to understand what you're doing, whether it makes sense to take it or not. That's why you need an assessment to identify your weak links, to understand a little bit about how you function. Then we provide something very targeted that can strengthen your constitution, your immunity. You must always have an overall perspective. Most people practice green allopathy. It's a plant for a symptom. That's not it. It's about understanding the whole person and increasingly providing things that work on synergies, on wholes, on systems, on organs. And synergistic effects are always potentially much more interesting than working on just systems or a specific organ. So we really try to work with a comprehensive, holistic vision. Then we could detail the benefits. We won't make it too long either. I have a list of numerous points, but we won't necessarily go into all the details. We've seen the anti-aging effect. Weight. We can say a few words about weight. We currently have the most effective therapy for obesity that you can find. So there are ways to do it. There's a mix between short intermittent dry fasting, short dry fasting every week, and slow dry fasting. But roughly speaking, you combine all that. You combine all that with a dietary system, and you have the most effective obesity therapy for people who want to lose weight that you can find. You can lose 2 kilos per day with dry fasting. Afterwards, you need to know how to find the right food combinations for the person in front of you. And then dry fasting is a fundamental pillar for weight loss. So we might be able to make a targeted video on that. But you have an effect on weight that is quite spectacular. I have people who have done treatments and gained up to 15 kilos compared to before the preparation. And when they did it 3 months after the treatment, there was about a 15 kilo difference. It's huge. And then it stabilized. So you can't just say it's simply dry fasting, it's stabilized. So for overweight people, there's really a process. There is a way to do it. So we really have something that should be widely popularized around the world. Because if people combine this with a smart dietary system, you truly have a formidable therapy for weight, at least, which would really prevent all these lifestyle diseases we see like diabetes, hypertension, overweight, obesity. We would really have a very good effect on all of this if people knew a little about dry fasting. And then I would say we could even achieve results without long dry fasts. It's less interesting, but we still get results. So regarding weight, we can go into detail about it. It's really something interesting. As for dependencies, we've talked about it, but it's something very interesting. So I recommend for people who are on psychotropics to try a small withdrawal if possible. If that's not possible, we go straight into dry fasting and then observe what happens day by day. So the management of medications, that's also a somewhat complex subject, but it requires expertise, it requires experience. You need to know how to handle these kinds of things. And it's not just about making everyone fast and ignoring the medications. You need to pay attention to the medications you take, how to manage that. It's a science. Then the general cellular reset of the body, you understood that well. So that's really one of the strong points. Action on the genome. So people who have received these well-known vaccinations, we see that the genome has taken a hit, the DNA has taken a hit. All genetic diseases, in quotes, depending on the case we have in front of us, in cases of autism, in cases of genetic diseases, dry fasting is quite indicated and appropriate. Afterwards, it's really about individualization. We truly have a therapy that is quite indicated for people with genetic disorders. But before that, we need to look at the systems, how they function, and first observe during short dry fasting, and then move on to long dry fasting and observe what happens. but there is truly a reset of the genome, of the genetic system as a whole with dry fasting. The body, with its stem cell mechanisms, its anti-infectious mechanisms, its renewing, repairing mechanisms, in a wholly powerful way of water fasting, you really have astonishing effects. It should be noted that in cases of autism, many people have autism transmitted by their parents as well, but there is fundamentally an unresolved infection problem, an intestinal problem passed on to children who become autistic. So we realized that there have been cases, there was a particular doctor who treated autism cases with antibiotics with very good results. So just imagine when we switch to dry fasting with something that is much gentler and much more interesting in terms of restoring health, the effects you can experience. Afterwards, it's on a case-by-case basis, but in any case, for genetic diseases, dry fasting definitely has its place in the range of options. Regarding dry fasting, I could continue with the benefits. There are many, and you have detailed them in my book. We might be able to continue with the benefits, but there are many, and of course there are contraindications. Not everyone can fast, but when it comes to the benefits, there are really not too many limits. There are a few cases where dry fasting is refused or discouraged, but these cases are very rare and must really be considered individually. So to be sure that the person, there is no vitality, there is a pathology that does not allow it. So this is really on a case-by-case basis. We have included generalities in the contraindications, but they remain generalities. There are cases, for example, you take the epilogue and epilepsy, it is not necessarily indicated, but here experience shows us that it is effective, it can help. So we will stop here. Maybe we will continue the benefits in another video. Thank you. And I wish you a good weekend. For me, it's my weekend. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.